Okay, so hi guys, my name is Jamie Conway. I'm doing climate change in Tuvalu for the final project, and here we go. Okay, so Tuvalu is a Polynesian island nation, and it's located in the Pacific Ocean, midway between Hawaii and Australia. It has a population of approximately 10,837 people, and it's one of the smallest countries in the world. And in this presentation, I just wanted to talk about the immediate threats Tuvalu faces as a result of the man-made global warming and the ultimate moral obligations we as a world have towards protecting small island countries like Tuvalu. So, Tuvalu contains 3 reef islands and 6 true atolls. It's one of the smallest and most remote countries in the world, as I've previously mentioned, and the average height of the islands is less than 2 meters above sea level, and the highest point in Tuvalu is about 4.6 meters above sea level. So these relatively low heights make the islands especially vulnerable to sea level rise. Also, 6 of the 9 coral atolls have lagoons that are open to the ocean, 2 have landlocked lagoons, and 1 doesn't have any lagoon at all. Now we'll go on to climate. So the climate in Tuvalu is mostly tropical, and it's moderated by easterly trade winds from March to November, and westerly gales and heavy rain from November to March. The sea level in Tuvalu varies as a consequence of a wide range of atmospheric and oceanographic influences. So according to the Pacific Climate Change Science Program report of 2011, the instability of the sea level is a result of El Niño Southern Oscillation, and it's also known as ENSO. A quote from this report states that ENSO has a major influence on sea levels across the Pacific, and this can influence the occurrence of extreme sea levels, thus threatening Tuvalu. So Tuvalu also experiences other sea level changes from La Niña, which causes strengthened trade winds, which create higher sea levels in the west and lower sea levels in the east in the Pacific Ocean. El Niño does the reverse effect, and it creates lower sea levels in the west and higher sea levels in the east. The Perigean spring tide also can cause seawater flooding in lower areas of Tuvalu. So you can see that Tuvalu is very influenced and impacted by these the rising and lowering of the sea level. So global warming. Tuvalu is one of the most vulnerable place on Earth that feels the effects of global warming. The threat of sea level rise may bring complete disaster to about the 10,000 Tuvaluans that are residing on the 9 extremely low coral atolls. Mostly Tuvalu is concerned about global increase in greenhouse gas emissions and their effect on the rising sea levels, which threaten the country's underground water table. So in 2000, the government appealed to Australia and New Zealand to take in the Tuvaluans if rising sea levels should make evacuation necessary. So you see how much global warming is just impacting this one country. So it's leading to possible migration. As of July 2014, there are 10,782 Tuvaluans, and because of the severity of the effects of global warming has on Tuvalu, migration is being looked into. This is a very difficult concept because the people have their identity, culture, well-being, spirituality embedded within Tuvalu, much like the connection between Hawaiians and Hawaii. So migration is seen as a last resort. For now, Tuvalu isn't really widely acknowledging migrations as a realistic policy because the people are afraid that if migration is seen as a viable option, the efforts to decrease man-made global warming will reduce the motivation to deal with the root cause of climate change, and so then nothing will get done, and they're worried that the world will just continue in its ways. So the impacts. So there are 7 main immediate threats for Tuvaluans. You have coastal, agricultural, water, health, and then the 2 types of fisheries, and then disaster. So in the National Adaptation Program of Actions, the government of Tuvalu identified the 7 and immediate threats for the livelihoods of Tuvaluans, and so these 7 effects: the coastal, the sea level has risen by 20 centimeters between 1870 and now, so this is a very dangerous trend for the islands. If it continues to rise and rise, the islands will be consumed by the ocean. Agricultural, due to sea level rise, the ground of Tuvalu is prone to salinization, so staple foods grown in Tuvalu are threatened. In the case of water, Tuvaluans rely on rainwater storage, and because the weather is so irregular and more droughts are occurring, there are much more water shortages. In accordance to health, the high tides and tropical cyclones support a breeding ground for waterborne illnesses, and this is causing epidemics throughout Tuvalu, which is detrimental towards the livelihood and the progress of Tuvalu. Fisheries, the climate change that is causing rising temperatures, so the biodiversity thus decreases. The second reason of fisheries is the rising temperature, and this reduces the shellfish and fish resources, which impacts the diet and the livelihood of Tuvaluans because their diet consists mainly of fish. In the case of the disaster, Tuvalu has been increasingly exposed to tropical storms and cyclones since 1990, so this is increasing disasters throughout Tuvalu. So awareness. In December 2009, the islands stalled talks at the United Nations Climate Change Conference in Copenhagen, fearing some of the other developing countries were not committing fully to the binding deals on a reduction in carbon emission. So the chief negotiator for Tuvalu said that Tuvalu is one of the most vulnerable countries in the world to climate change, and that our future rests on the outcome of this meeting. At the end of the conference, there was a plea to the nation that stated that global warming is the greatest threat to humanity, and they were basically just asking, like, the fate of my country rests in your hands, and they needed the developed countries such as the US, China, and Australia to actually step up and do something about it. So actions taken. In November 2011, Tuvalu became a founding member of the Polynesian Leaders Group. So this group is a regional grouping intended to cooperate on a variety of issues, including culture, language, education, responses to climate change, and trade investment. Tuvalu also participates in the Alliance of Small Island States, which is a coalition of small island and low-lying coastal countries that have concerns about their vulnerability to the adverse effects of climate change. So they're trying to move forward to catalyze more ambitious and active climate plan, and on September 29th of 2013, the Deputy Prime Minister asked the world to please save Tuvalu in order to save yourself and the world. So they just basically want everybody to be aware that global warming is happening and it's having adverse effects on countries now. So it goes into the moral obligations. So Tuvalu is one of the smallest countries, as I've repeated many times throughout this thing, and with that it has the lowest levels of carbon emissions, yet Tuvalu is facing the biggest impact of climate change. So we start asking the question, who is responsible for global warming, and are the more developed countries such as the US, China, and Australia obligated to help save Tuvalu from climate change? So it's clear that Tuvalu is a victim of these developed countries' pollutions, and what we need to ask ourselves is, how are we going to help them and how are we going to help ourselves? So global warming just needs to be seen as a direct threat, and climate change must be addressed. And powerful countries need to start taking an affirmative action to drastically decrease carbon emissions and to support countries like Tuvalu. And if they don't, Tuvalu won't be the last country that has adverse effects. It's slowly just going to get worse and worse. So that was the end of my presentation. I have a few links that discuss, that have some of the pictures I got from the presentation. Thank you, and I hope you guys are more aware of Tuvalu. Have a great weekend.